What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Like I said, we're going to be trying to do a bunch of these. Probably going to do one every single day, or at least over the next week. A lot of people are having their fantasy drafts next week. Some people are doing it over Labor Day weekend, but want to keep giving you guys as much insight and content as we can. Now, a little bit interesting this year, specifically due to everything happening in the league with there being no preseason. Typically around this time of the year, we're seeing some massive ADP shifts, and that's not really happening all that much. You see a few like small drops based on players that are coming down with like an injury in preseason. Guys like AJ Green are starting to see a little bit of a dip with that hamstring injury. Miles Sanders saw his ADP fall a little bit over the past couple of days. So but other than that, there hasn't been any, like in 2018 when Christian McCaffrey broke off that massive run, or last year when Dalvin Cook did the same thing in preseason and he shoots up like, a whole round in ADP, or someone gets injured. Like that hasn't really happened yet. And obviously an injury can still happen, but overall, what's cool is, the strategy that we've been going through recommending since pretty much since July, it hasn't really changed much because ADP is still pretty much the same. So that being said, today we're going to do a draft from the 4 slot. We did a 2 slot yesterday and explain a little bit more over this video. I don't think I did a good job yesterday going over it. We're doing kind of a traditional league, but we add an extra flex. So it gives us the option to add another running back or another tight end into our starting spot. And pro tip, if you want to play in a league that's a little bit more competitive and a little less luck driven, add more starting spots to your lineup each week, because it means that you have to actually maintain decent depth on your bench, make good trades, make good waiver wire acquisitions, because a lot of people are able to just skirt by with the standard lineup and their bench is terrible. But the more starting spots you have, the more you actually have to be zoned in and paying attention to how things are going. So, but anyway, that being said, let's get this going and see what this looks like. So, begin the draft. And so, little less than standard. Typically, Ezekiel Elliott goes at pick number 3, but because Alvin Kamara went at 3, we'll go ahead and take Ezekiel Elliott here. And obviously, if you had one of the first 4 picks, your mind is probably already made up for you. You can make the argument for a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or I'll also continue to stand for Miles Sanders and say that they should be able to jump up into that tier this year and have a shot at being the number 1 overall running back. But, if you have a pick in the first 4, like I said, your mind is pretty much already made up for you. You don't really have to think about this one too much. You should be taking one of the elite running backs because they give you such a significant advantage at the position. Not really any reason to not take one of those running backs there. So you won't really ever see me deviating from that. I know some people advocate for Michael Thomas, but honestly, at this point, I have Devontae Adams ranked over Michael Thomas, and I wouldn't reach for Michael Thomas. I'm pretty much guaranteed to take a running back in the first round. Now, we have a similar problem here in the 4 slot as we did yesterday when we did the 2 slot, is all of the other running backs are gone. There's not really anyone from a running back standpoint. I'm not going to take any of the 3rd round RB ADP guys here. We took George Kittle yesterday and it actually worked out pretty well for us, but I want to show you guys what it kind of looks like if you take 2 wide receivers here. Like I said, once you get past the first 18 or so picks, unless one of these running back falls, like a Nick Chubb or an Aaron Jones, you're pretty much stuck in choosing, do you want to take a tight end early? Do you want to take a quarterback like Lamar Jackson early? Or do you want to double up on wide receivers? So we're going to take, see, even Chris Godwin is gone, so it makes this choice really rough, but you know what? Screw it. I'm actually curious. I haven't done this yet. Let's try taking Lamar Jackson. It's not something I typically recommend, but I want to see what this team looks like if we take Lamar Jackson early. So at this point, we have Lamar Jackson and Ezekiel Elliott. Again, we're not looking at the running backs here because other than Jonathan Taylor, there's no one that really interests me at this spot. From a wide receiver perspective, we took DJ Moore yesterday. DJ Moore is honestly my favorite guy here, but for the sake of having slightly different drafts between the drafts that we're doing, We'll take Allen Robinson here, another guy having a similar tier, and we'll go from there. So this is the first time trying out taking a quarterback early. Like I said, I probably am not going to recommend it, but I really want to see what this team ends up looking like. So you see Robert Woods, DJ Moore, Jonathan Taylor, Odell Beckham, all those guys I really like. They're already off the board. So at this point, we only have one running back and one wide receiver. Juju Smith-Schuster fell this far. That's pretty decent. Again, at running back, I like DeAndre Swift, but I think he'll come back to us. We can probably wait. Let's go ahead and take... Honestly, I'm fine with taking Juju, Calvin Ridley, or A.J. Brown here. It's really your call. I believe that Juju will rebound and have a really good year, so I'll take Juju, especially since he normally goes in the end of the third round. Falling here to 4-9, it seems wrong not to take him. And then, this is one player that will probably end up drafting in a lot of these mock drafts just because I have him ranked a good bit higher than consensus ADP. So we'll take DeAndre Swift here as our RB2. So we got Ezekiel Elliott and DeAndre Swift. And we got Allen Robinson and Juju Smith-Schuster. So, that's not a bad start considering we took Lamar Jackson in the second round. So having the, potential for Lamar Jackson to do the same thing that he did last year, it's definitely enticing, although, it's going to be a bit unreasonable to expect him to be 9 fantasy points per game above everyone else at the position like he was last year. So, again, not something I'm necessarily recommending, but let's see how the rest of this team turns out. Okay, so now is where things get a little bit more dicey. James White is an interesting player at running back. A lot of people don't think he has a lot of upside, and I understand that. However, I think with Cam Newton being there, it actually will bring up the floor for James White. Cam Newton is going to devote more attention from the linebacker and with his rushing ability. And we saw last year what like Lamar Jackson was able to do for a guy like Mark Ingram, who's never really been much of a pass catcher in the first place. He became very valuable in that backfield. Christian McCaffrey had a fantastic year in 2018 with Cam Newton there. And from a receiver standpoint, the only guy I'm really looking at here is Michael Gallup. And I think there's a chance that Michael Gallup comes back to us. So in order to make sure we have a decent running back option outside of Elliott and Swift, we'll take James White here. And let's see what happens in the next couple of picks. And like I said, Michael Gallup came back to us. Brandon Cooks is also interesting to me. I do think that Brandon Cooks is going to have a decent year, but he's one concussion away from retirement. Jarvis Landry is someone that I'm probably too low on. I'm worried about the injury that he suffered last year, and coming back this year, only was recently activated off of the PUP list, but at least it's looking like he's going to start. For diversity's sake, let's just take Jarvis Landry this draft so we don't take Gallup every single time. But in a real draft, I'd probably take Gallup here. But, again, this team is actually coming together pretty good. It's the same strategy that we took yesterday, just taking a quarterback instead of a tight end. So our running backs and receivers are about as strong as they were yesterday. It's just now we have Lamar Jackson, and we'll have to get a late round tight end here in a bit. So receivers are starting to get, at this point, this is honestly my least favorite part of the draft. So once you get to around, this point of the 8th round, even, up here around the middle of the 7th round, I feel like the tier of players in this spot just turns, well, for one, it's pretty gross, and two, it's about the same for the next 3 or 4 rounds. Like, to me, there's not a huge difference between guys like Marvin Jones, some of the rookies here, Jamison Crowder, Darius Slayton, Christian Kirk, Jalen Reagor. A lot of these guys, Sterling Shepard, to me, are in a similar tier, but they're going to be there for the next couple of rounds. Same thing with like running backs, like Alexander Madison. Not going to be drafting a straight up handcuff unless I have Dalvin Cook. I don't like any of the Kerryon Johnson, Philip Lindsay types, so it makes these rounds really annoying. And you could go tight end here, but I like Tyler Higbee, but I mean, there's so many good tight ends, and I want to grab a few of them later. Let's just take Marvin Jones. I know we did that yesterday, but I do think that Marvin Jones is still a bit underrated. He averaged about the same amount of fantasy points per game as Kenny Golladay last year when in the games that he played with Matthew Stafford. So on the last year of his deal there, but he has the ceiling to give you, like a 4 touchdown week. So I do still really like Marvin Jones. Jamison Crowder is interesting too. I just don't feel like he actually gives you the upside that you want. Darius Slayton I like a lot. I think he has a massive ceiling each week, and if he can find a way to beat out Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate for more targets, I think that Darius Slayton could end up being Daniel Jones' favorite receiver, but their opening schedule is pretty gross, so it's kind of hard to endorse taking them in a redraft league. We'll take Jalen Reagor here because I think Jalen Reagor is set up to smash in Philadelphia. That receiver core outside of Jalen Reagor is either very old or very beat up or very inexperienced. You got Deshaun Jackson, who hasn't finished a season in God knows how long. Alshon Jeffrey is not even going to be healthy to start the year. And then Greg Ward. I mean, yes, they have Zach Ertz there. Dallas Goedert just broke his thumb. So I think Jalen Reagor is in a spot set up to smash immediately. He's been making a lot of splashes in camp. So Jalen Reagor is a guy that I'm very bullish on this year. So once we get to this point in the draft, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the receiver core that we have. Probably not going to really be taking many more receivers. Like I said, pretty much every draft, I'm going to be trying to take as many handcuffed running back, or not handcuffed, like lottery ticket running backs as possible, because you really want to be able to nail the next Alvin Kamara type guy that you can grab late in the draft that ends up completely flipping your league. There wasn't really one of those last year. A lot of people were in on Justice Hill. I guess you could call Devin Singletary that, and he did an okay job, but he never really had like that massive boost to his value later on. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take our favorite tight end of the year and take Mike Gesicki here, and then we'll come back and grab a couple of running backs after. So we'll give you a few options there. So we see Tony Pollard goes. I mean, maybe you could make the argument it would have been a better idea to take Tony Pollard since we already had Ezekiel Elliott. If you're looking for a little more security and aren't as worried about upside, especially with the ADP here, Mike Gesicki probably wouldn't have made it back to us. But overall, I'd rather take a few flyer guys here. Now, Damian Harris is an interesting name here too, considering we grabbed James White. Damian Harris has actually looked pretty good in the offseason thus far and could be in line to get a lot of touches. Boston Scott as well. Let's take Boston Scott. I'll talk about him in a second. So I'm very much a fan of Miles Sanders this year, but Boston Scott is in line to have a pretty good year if Sanders does miss any time. And with him already being on the injury report prior to the season, it should be a reminder to everyone that just because we're dealing with all this other crap in the world, there's still going to be a lot of injuries in fantasy. So having a guy with the upside of Boston Scott, getting him in the 11th round, I like that a lot. DeAndre Washington, I don't really think he's going to be the guy. Darrell Williams has been running with the ones every time Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been out. Jerick McKinnon is a guy that I'm probably going to draft every single chance that I can. The ambiguous nature of the 49ers backfield in, bringing in different running backs that have been completely forgotten and finding a way to give them fantasy relevance is something that I want a part of. And he's the cheapest option here with, guys like Raheem Mostert. Where did he go? He went in the 5th round. And then we get Tevin Coleman going in the 8th. And arguably, Jerick McKinnon could have a similar touch count based on the way he's looking in training camp right now. He could very well have that 3rd down role locked up, which means he's going to be getting targets, which are a lot more valuable than carries anyway. So I don't know. I'd rather have Jerick McKinnon just taking him late, because if he comes out and is a nothing, you can drop him right away and go towards someone else. Whereas if you spend a 5th round pick on Raheem Mostert, you can't just drop him right away because you're too pot committed. We could also take another high upside tight end since we didn't go early tight ends here. I like Jarwin. I like Jack Doyle. Actually, I lied. I don't like Jack Doyle. I like TJ Hawkinson and Jonnu Smith is what I was trying to say. So let's take TJ Hawkinson here now. I know he's still dealing with that ankle injury that limited him last year, but he's still been making some decent splashes in camp, and I think he can overcome it. We'll see. You're getting him in the 13th round, so if he ends up not being good, just drop him and pick up the next Chris Herndon type. But the point with the tight end is to take a few guys that you could potentially hit on. Now, honestly, at this point, if you wanted to take another tight end, you could, although Dallas Goedert is the only other high upside guy here, in my opinion, and with his injury, I'm already a little bit soured on him this year. So let's look at the running backs again. We talked about Benny Snell yesterday, probably the backup role there to James Conner, who hasn't had much luck with staying healthy. Darrell Williams, as we mentioned earlier, is most likely the actual backup to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We'll take Darrell Williams, because there's no guarantee that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to actually maintain or start off with a ridiculous amount of touches. Maybe Darrell Williams will have a pretty good game. We can flip him immediately after that. So, all right. So honestly, this team isn't that bad. Again, I'm not typically condoning taking a quarterback in the second round. That is normally the wrong approach. But if Lamar Jackson hits, or even if he just finishes top 3 at the position, it's not going to be a complete miss. And I mean, our running back core is still pretty good with Ezekiel Elliott, DeAndre Swift, and James White as our starters. Still got Allen Robinson and Juju Smith-Schuster, Jarvis Landry, Marvin Jones, Jalen Reagor. Tight end, we got Mike Gesicki and TJ Hawkinson, and then we got some upside flyer running backs like Boston Scott, Jerick McKinnon, and Darrell Williams. I mean, to be completely fair, I don't hate it. I thought I would, but honestly, the ADP of the wide receivers that go from the back half of the second round all the way into the end of the fourth, sometimes bleeding over into the fifth here, like guys like Tyler Lockett and DJ Chark are like the last guys in that really high upside tier. The fact that you can still get wide receivers like Calvin Ridley or Juju Smith-Schuster or AJ Brown at near the back of the fourth is the reason why it's really hard for me to endorse taking a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds this year. Because if you're in the later half of the draft, you can have 2 stud running backs, and then you don't have to worry about running back for a while. Or if you come back here to the front of the first round, you get a elite running back 1. And then you can either take a guy like Travis Kelce or George Kittle or a Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes type and still have a pretty strong wide receiver core. So had Chris Godwin fallen here, I probably would have gone Chris Godwin, but honestly, I don't really hate my receiver core. With Robinson, Juju, Landry, Marvin Jones, and Jalen Reagor, that's not bad. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think taking Lamar Jackson in the second round is a bad idea? Again, he's probably going to regress some, but if he comes anywhere, 80% of what he did last year, he's still going to be a valuable pick that early on. It's just the price, obviously, to get him is pretty steep, but it didn't really cause our team to really be weak in any other areas. So I don't know. You guys let me know what you think. We'll be posting up some pretty fun strategy videos over the course of the next week, trying to get you guys as prepared as possible for your drafts. But thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you in our next mock draft where we'll do slot 6 and show you guys what it's like drafting from the middle of a 12-team draft. All right, thank you guys for watching. See you in the next video.